ABC Kinderteach presents Grand Canyon, written by Jason Chin. This version of the story will focus on the ecological and geological aspects of this book. Due to the content density of this book, only the ecological and geological elements will be presented in this version. The grandest canyon. This book depicts a journey, or talks about a trip, across Grand Canyon from the north to the south rim. The mountain lion roughly follows the North Kebab Trail into the canyon. The girl and her father begin near Phantom Ranch, right here, and take the South Kebab Trail, this right here, up to the south rim. On their combined journeys, they witness a wide range of habitats and geologic features. Yet, despite traveling roughly 20 miles, descending a vertical mile down and up again, they've only seen a fraction of Grand Canyon, or just a little bit of it. The canyon is simply too big for any one person to see it all, even in a lifetime of study. Its size, however, is just part of what makes Grand Canyon grand. The canyon is mind-boggling old, or really old, has a rich cultural history, a fascinating ecology, and its geologic significance is second to none, which means it's very important. It is the combination of these impressive elements that make it the grandest canyon on Earth. Human history. Humans have been visiting and living in the Grand Canyon for at least 12,000 years. The earliest people to come to the Grand Canyon region or area hunted big game, like big animals, with stone-tipped spears and lived a nomadic life, which means they wandered from place to place. Later, several different cultures settled in and around the canyon, including the ancestral Puebloans, farmers and skilled potters who lived in multi-room buildings called pueblos. Today's Hopi and Zuni peoples trace their heritage to the ancestral Puebloans. It wasn't until Hopi guides led Spanish explorers to the South Rim in 1540 that the first Europeans saw Grand Canyon. In 1869, the explorer and geologist John Wesley Powell led an expedition down the Colorado River and through Grand Canyon by boat. It was a perilous or dangerous journey, and news of his success spread far and wide. In the years that followed, many more people came to Grand Canyon, including geologists, surveyors, miners, artists, and tourists. In 1919, President Woodrow Wilson signed the bill into law that established Grand Canyon National Park, and today more than 4 million people visit the park each year. The park covers more than 1 million acres of land, and most of the canyon lies inside the park boundary, while parts of it are within the borders of the Hualapai, Havasupai, and Navajo Indian reservations. The canyon remains a place of cultural and spiritual importance for many Native American tribes, including the Hopi, Navajo, Zuni, Paiute, Apache, Hualapai, and Havasupai. The Colorado River. The Colorado River flows from the Rocky Mountains to the Gulf of California, and on the way it crosses a broad area of elevated land called the Colorado Plateau. Grand Canyon has been cut into the southwestern edge of the plateau. A lot of sediment washes into the Colorado River from the arid landscape or dry landscape, turning its water rust red, which is how the river got its name. Rio Colorado means red river in Spanish. In the spring, melting snow from the Rockies and mountains floods the river, and with all that extra water comes more and larger sized sediment. Although flooding in the canyon is now controlled by the Glen Canyon Dam upstream, large floods did rage through Grand Canyon in the past. The dam also traps sediment behind it, so the river is no longer muddy in Grand Canyon. It's thought that the canyon was carved primarily during these floods, and that during prehistoric times, mega floods carried car-sized boulders through the canyon. The river's location on the Colorado Plateau, the availability of sediments, and its annual floods all contributed to the carving of Grand Canyon. Grand mystery. Although the processes that carve canyons are understood, nobody knows exactly how Grand Canyon was carved. In fact, nobody even knows how old Grand Canyon is. Geologists agree that the Colorado River has been running on its present course for 6 to 5 million years, and for a long time it was thought that the canyon is as old as the river. Recent evidence suggests, however, that the canyon may be much older than the modern Colorado River, and that other rivers started carving the canyon before the Colorado. Different geologists have different ideas about the specific details and timeline of the canyon's formation. They actively debate them and are working to uncover new evidence that will support or disprove their ideas. We may never know the full story, but stay tuned. More evidence is bound to turn up and shed new light on the carving of Grand Canyon. How canyons are carved. Canyons are carved by rivers, but not all rivers carve canyons. To cut a canyon, a river must flow across high terrain and carry sediment in its water. The elevated land gives the river something to carve into, and the higher the elevation, the deeper the canyon can be. The actual carving is done not by river water, but by sediment or dirt in the water. As sand, gravel, and most importantly, boulders roll downstream and strike the river bottom, they chip away at the bedrock and deepen the canyon. The more sediment there is, and the larger the rocks, the greater the river's ability to deepen its channel. Canyons grow wider as their walls erode and send debris tumbling into their rivers. This added sediment increases the river's cutting ability as it is washed downstream and eventually removed from the canyon. Rivers deepen canyons when sediment chips away at the bedrock. 5. Grand Canyon is carved. At some point after the uplift of the Colorado Plateau began, Grand Canyon began to be carved. After at least 5 million years of excavation, the canyon now reaches all the way down to the basement rocks at the bottom. 4. The Colorado Plateau rises. Between 70 and 40 million years ago, tectonic forces lifted up the basement rocks and all the layers on top of them. Today, the uplifted land is known as the Colorado Plateau. Horizontal layers deposited. Eventually, most of the supergroup rocks eroded away. Then, starting 525 million years ago, many rock layers were deposited as the ocean rose and fell, alternatively covering and uncovering the land. 2. the supergroup forms and tilts. Starting about 1,250 million years ago, the rock layers of the Grand Canyon supergroup piled up on top of the basement rocks, then faulting caused the land to break and tilt. This is why the Grand Canyon supergroup layers are at an angle. 1. Birth of the basement. Around 1.75 billion years ago, forces deep within the earth caused an island chain to crash into ancient North America. Heat and pressure from the collision created the basement rocks. Ecological communities in Grand Canyon. The boreal forest, the ponderosa pine forest, pinyon juniper woodland, desert scrub, riparian, which means along rivers and streams at all elevations or heights. The boreal forest. Boreal or northern forests of spruce and fir grow in the canyon's north rim only, because the north rim is about 1,000 feet higher than the south rim. Ponderosa pine forest. Ponderosa pine forests are found on both rims and in some places below the rim of the canyon. Pinyon juniper woodland. Pinyon pines and Utah junipers are drought-tolerant trees, which means they can do without water for a long time, and anchor this desert woodland community. Desert scrub. Species from the 3 deserts that border the canyon are found in Grand Canyon: the Great Basin Desert to the north, the Mojave to the west, and the Sonoran to the south. Riparian. Along rivers and streams at all elevations, riparian communities surround and depend on flowing water, such as rivers and streams. They have the greatest wildlife diversity, different types, of all habitats in the canyon. Grand Canyon ecology. Grand Canyon is home to thousands of species, including 373 birds, 92 mammals, 1,750 plants, and more than 8,000 invertebrates. 29 species are endemic to the canyon, meaning they don't live anywhere else on Earth. This wide variety of life is due to the canyon's topography, or physical structure, its rugged landscape, and in particular its great depth have a significant effect on climate throughout the canyon. The lower the elevation, the hotter and drier the canyon becomes. Because of the variation in climate, specific groups of plants and animals called ecological communities live at different elevations, and these communities can be very different. Hiking into the canyon has been compared to walking from the forests of Canada to the deserts of Mexico in a matter of hours. Prominent ecological communities in Grand Canyon. Elevations are approximate. Communities usually transition or change slowly from one to the next and may be found outside the listed range. Grand Canyon geology. Grand Canyon has one of the most remarkable sequences of rock layers found anywhere in the world. The age of its rocks span more than 1.5 billion years, about a third of the age of Earth, and geologists have learned a lot about the deep history of the region from studying these rocks. Each rock layer formed at a different geological time and in a different environment, and the rocks tell us about these environments. Like detectives, geologists look for clues in the rocks and use them to piece together a picture of the past. Common clues that geologists study are fossils, sedimentary structures, and the type of rock. The story in the rocks. The layers of rock exposed in the walls of Grand Canyon are stacked in sequence from oldest to youngest. Bottom is the oldest, top is the youngest. Each layer tells us what the region was like when that layer was deposited, and together they tell us how the region changed over time. Geologists can read the layers like pages in a book, and after years of careful study, they've pieced together the story in the rocks. The story starts at the bottom with the formation of the basement rocks. The Kebab Formation, Toroweep Formation, Coconino Sandstone, Hermit Formation, Toupee Group, Surprise Canyon Formation, Redwall Limestone, Temple Butte Formation, Moab Limestone, Bright Angel Shale, Tapiat Sandstone, Grand Canyon Supergroup, and the Vishnu Basement Rocks. Starting more than 1 billion years ago, layers of sediment, such as sand and mud, piled up on top of the basement rocks one after another. Over time, the layers of sediment turned into layers of solid rock, such as sandstone and mudstone. Much later, Grand Canyon was carved into these layers. The youngest layers are at the top and the oldest layers at the bottom. Rock structures. Sediment often retains its structure as it turns to stone, telling us what the surface of the land looked like in the distant past. Raindrop impressions in mudstone record the moment when rain fell on the muddy earth, while ripple marks tell of ancient mud flats or river beds. And there's a raindrop impression. Most of Grand Canyon's layers are made of sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock forms when loose sediment like dirt is transported, deposited, and then compacted or pressed and cemented into solid rock over time. These sedimentary rocks help geologists decipher or figure out what the environment was like when the sediment was deposited. For example, limestone is often made up of the shells of marine or sea creatures, so a limestone layer suggests an ocean environment. Shale, which comes from mud, may suggest a mudflat or riverbank, and sandstone, which comes from sand, suggests a desert, a river, or a sandy beach. When rocks break apart, it's called weathering. When the broken pieces are carried away, it's called erosion. Ice and growing plants break up rocks in Grand Canyon, and most of the sediment is removed from the canyon by water. Grand Canyon's walls have both cliffs and slopes because different layers erode in different ways. Sandstone and limestone tend to break off in blocks, leaving cliffs. Shale and mudstone tend to crumble and form slopes. Often shale erodes beneath limestone or sandstone and the cliff wall gives way. It does here. The sea covered the Grand Canyon region many times in the past. As the sea level rose, layers of sediment composed of sand, mud, and shells piled up. So the sea level rises and sediment layers accumulate. The sediment was compacted and cemented together over time and became sedimentary rock. So mud becomes mudstone and shale. Shells of marine creatures become limestone. Sand becomes sandstone. Different types of sediment became different types of rocks. Fossils. Almost every layer in Grand Canyon has fossils. The fossils give us a glimpse of ecosystems that existed when the layers formed. Seashells tell us about marine, or sea, ecosystems, while footprints tell us about terrestrial, on land, environments. Since the layers in Grand Canyon are in sequence from oldest to youngest, they also give us a picture of how life in the region changed over time. The oldest fossils are in the Grand Canyon supergroup, which date from the Precambrian, the period in Earth's history when life first appeared. The fossils in these rocks include stromatolites, structures made by bacteria, and microfossils such as amoeba, right here. Moving up the canyon to younger rocks and forward in time, more complex species, more complicated living things start to appear. Trilobites and the burrows of worm-like organisms appear in the layers above the supergroup. Terrestrial species including reptile tracks, seed ferns, and trees appear in the Hermit Formation and the Coconino Sandstone near the top of the canyon. And these are reptile tracks. As Grand Canyon's rock layers were deposited, the remains of plants and animals were buried and some became fossils. A trilobite dies. Sediment accumulates or collects around it. Shell becomes fossil as sediment becomes rock. Erosion eventually exposes the fossil. Fossils are the remains or traces of ancient, very old life that have been preserved in rock. Most fossils are found in sedimentary rock. Fossil footprints and worm burrows are called trace fossils. Fossil skeletons and shells are called body fossils. Trace fossils are different from body fossils in that there's no real animal or plant left behind. It's just their footprints or where they did some digging. Of course, body fossils, the actual body of the trilobite is, or whatever, is left behind.